can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Morning.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Good morning to Lucy. Good morning to Yasmin. Just want to say that we are being brought here with our ads, and so just start off. We've got like this show that's brought to you in partnership with the John Catt Educational Publishers of professional development and books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So if you want to level up your professional development today or any day, quite frankly, visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles and use your code, which is JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Also, if you're looking for another great educational podcast, there is Chalk and Talk with Anna Stoke. So Anna is a passionate advocate for evidence-based math education for students of all ages. And on her podcast, she talks about everything from effective teaching methods and how to guide teaching maths facts to tips for evaluating research shows. Claims she brings on top-notch guests, and educators and researchers and policymakers and discusses issues that directly impact on teachers and students. Chalk and Talk, for anybody interested in education, find it wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, so let's have our first discussion, which was actually like left over from like last week. But there's a whole discussion about summer holidays. So it wasn't anything in particular, but just the idea of like 6-week summer holidays compared to other aspects. So the idea is this, that sometimes people think that maybe 6 weeks is too long, and therefore, if you have a 6-week holiday, actually what you're doing is you're like diminishing the learning, and maybe having a shorter like summer break and a longer break somewhere else would be better. I don't think they're suggesting that we have no break at all, or that it goes away completely, just where it's placed. So Yasmin, to start with you, what do you think about that?
I think every year it's a topic that I've seen come up with teachers, and I have often thought about how exhausting some of the school terms can be because of the fact that they're not an equal length. Me personally, I have thought about the fact that if we spaced out holidays better in exchange for a shorter summer holiday, that teachers would maybe be able to pace themselves better. So if, say, every half term was 2 weeks, and then obviously Christmas and Easter were also 2 weeks, then, that would leave us with 4 weeks for summer. And my understanding is a lot of people think that's better. However, what I don't like is this kind of treatment of schools, like some sort of like childcare facility, or like if the complaint, like if it's something for teachers, then I support it. But if it's because parents or other people don't want to have to supervise school kids for 6 weeks or think it's too long, then I don't. And I know a lot of the time when this debate comes up, people compare it to other countries which have longer summer holidays. I even did some school years myself in Egypt when I was in primary school, and school used to close in May and it opened in late September. And, it was great. But the only other holiday that we got was called midterms, I believe. And it was between like December to late January. I think you'd get about a month off school. So they were the only two school holidays we ever got. But I think for me, I support changes in school holidays if it's, from teacher's voice, and not if the argument is, well, this isn't good for children, or other people can't look after kids in the summer.
Thank you. Lucy?
Well, you see, I get where you're coming from on it. The origins, we're always told, of this long 6-week holiday was so that children could help with the harvests, and that was the origin. Harvest often tends to go into September though, so I don't know whether the dates changed. What I remember with my children was that by the time you got to July, that mid-July where it's so hot, they're probably doing more things, they're out playing till sort of 7-8 o'clock when they go to bed. They were exhausted, they would be absolutely exhausted, and I remember illness and things, missing all the end of term things because they'd sort of got just completely run down. So I think we'd need to be aware of that. And also the problem with making your half terms all 2 weeks long is that you'll really mess up the exam system, because everything's built around at the moment the half term that we have. And then if you extend it, if you bring it forward or if you extend it, then you're either making the kids start their exam sessions too soon, or you're reducing the marking time. You'd have to almost reset the dates at the end of the summer for the results to come out, because they struggle. It's quite a battle, I understand. It's a lot of pressure to get those results out in the first place. So that would be an issue. My kids went to a state boarding school, but they were day pupils. My eldest boarded, but my others were day pupils, and they had 2 weeks in the first half term in October, because they had lots of students from the Commonwealth and different places, and so they needed time to go home, particularly in that first sort of term for the new starters. And then they had 3 weeks at Christmas as well, and then all of the rest was the same. But that, when I was working in a different state school, I used to be so jealous. My kids sat home for a week before Christmas, not doing all the things that I would be needing to do in that time. I used to think 3 weeks at Christmas and that 2-week half term just get you through, because that January term, that's the changeable one, isn't it, because of Easter. So sometimes we would have a 6 or 7 week January to half term, and then half term to Easter would only be 4 weeks, and again, that really messes around with the exam preparation, because some years you felt like you were having to rush through everything really quickly. Other years you could have 2 6-week terms. So I think probably that Easter half-term holiday, they've tried to change it a little bit. So sometimes Easter is it right at the end of the holidays or right at the beginning of the holidays to try and even out those times. So I can see the pros and cons. I think 4 weeks at summer would probably be okay, but you couldn't finish this summer any later, because like I said, I think the kids are absolutely exhausted. And I don't know how it works in Scotland. I don't know how they do it, but they go back sort of mid to end of August, I think. So I just think that makes that autumn and Christmas terms really long. So I don't know, I kind of feel stick with what we've got until somebody puts an idea on the table. I will think about it.
Well, here, how about I go even more controversial? I think that actually it might be worth us having slightly different half terms, which we already do, and regardless of like the amount of like weeks that we have, although I do think it would make a big difference, because let's face it, when you've got like a 1 week half term, all you do is plan during the half term if you're a teacher, and at best you get rest, at worst you're just planning for like the next half term, so you're not really getting a rest, so you're not really like recovering from like that half term at all. Why don't we have slightly different ones, so that actually parents, in terms of holidays and things like that, which is like term time holidays is a big thing. So I think that's part of the reason for why people talk about having different, like, school holidays, is so that we don't have to like pay the premium. Now, I still think we probably will have to pay something, but at least we'll have something slightly different compared to before, which at the moment it's huge. Like the overlap with half terms is massive. We know it's 1 week before, 1 week after. So do people like who are taking their children on holiday. So then we have this massive argument about people doing that, but you can kind of understand why they take their children out, because it costs less. It just does. And even if you fine them, well, the fine is not as much as what it'll cost them less. So they think we'll go ahead. Whereas what we need is for the children to be in school. So maybe having like slightly staggered half terms across the country might not be such a bad thing. But again, I'm going to throw it back out to you. Whoever wants to speak can speak.
Well, the only problem with that, we live on the border so we're in Somerset, but we're on the Wiltshire and the Dorset border. And sometimes some of the kids from, certain areas will go to school in Dorset or in Gillingham from where we live now, from this sort of approximate area. And if they have different holidays, and you've got children in a primary school in Somerset with one half term and children in the secondary school in Dorset or Wiltshire with the other half term, that makes it no more straightforward or simple. So that's the only thing, where you live on those borders, you might find that that's a problem. We have it with inset days, where parents would always say, why can't the secondary school have the same inset days as the primary school? But of course they all have different schedules, different ideas and different plans. And so so that's the only challenge. Outside of that, I don't mind. I spoke to a friend who has a holiday let. She's a farmer and she's got an old cottage that she lets out. And she said people have to remember, by the way, that the price in the holidays is the price, and the price the rest of the year is reduced. They're discounted prices to try and get people in. And that idea that they put the prices up, it never occurred to me before, but it did make sense actually, that they're discounting it just to try and get somebody in. So just adding that.
I think airlines, even if we had staggered half term, because everything is just so like profit driven, I just feel like they would hike the prices across all the staggered half terms anyway, because it would still be half term. So I just think maybe, how teachers can get the blue light card now and there are like teacher discounts. I just feel like there should be some sort of acknowledgement for teachers when it comes to airlines or flying, because it's not really a teacher's fault. This is our profession and it shouldn't have to affect us.
Yeah.
I know nobody cares.
Teaching assistants as well, have to extend to them too. I do think there's something to be said for slightly shortening the summer holidays, right? Because I don't think we need the full 6 weeks if we have weeks in between. But I do agree with Lucy where she's saying that it has to be before, not after. So what we need to think about is like, okay, can we do like, so the first half term that we have probably could do with like 2 weeks, let's face it, because it's a really long half term. And then between that and Easter, possibly then again. So where do we actually place this? Because you're right, when it comes to like exam marking, which I hadn't even thought about, to be fair, even though like I mark the SATs, so you think I'd think about it all the time. But the fact is that, you do have like a short like time frame where you've got to like have this turnover. And therefore, when it comes to GCSEs and A levels, either you're going to have to pay like overtime rates, or you're going to have to like pay them, or what you have to try and convince people in their holidays to actually do the work. And I don't think that's going to happen in quite the same way. But do you think the current system works effectively? I think let's go back to like first principles, right? Does it work effectively? What would be the alternative? So I'll come to you first, Lucy.
I think it does. Like I said, if somebody put a dated proposal on the table to consider, then it would be worth considering. But it's always a sort of an arbitrary, what do you think we should do? And when you speak to people, my idea would be an extra week at Christmas to get all your Christmas shopping done and, do all the lovely, lovely things before Christmas. But other people would say they'd like an extra week after Christmas to recover from Christmas. Like, everybody's got different ideas. And that's why the system we've got currently, I guess hasn't been changed because everybody has different ideas as to what would work, and we're very used to that. Also, you've got people, you know, a lot of people have family who live in other countries now, you know, and if you've got family in Australia, your parents live in Australia, that time to fly to Australia, this isn't me, by the way, but I've known people who've gone, you know, to see family every summer holiday. That's one of the things they do, but you also need that time at home because teachers, I mean, some teachers have to paint their own classrooms and things like that and prepare. They have to change all their displays in the classroom and get everything ready for the new year coming in. So, you know, there is more to the holidays than just sort of resting and recouping. Actually, a lot of it is spent. If you do secondary school, for example, I remember my head of department, you know, in the sort of weeks surrounding exam results time, and you're talking 2 sets of exam results, so there was a good fortnight in the middle of it where she would be trying to organise remarks, you know, sort of analysing the results. Do you get what I mean? And so that's a lot of work too. So that 6 weeks at least allows for somebody to get away before they come back and start preparing for the next year.
Yasmin, what do you feel?
What was the question? I forgot what your question was.
Just like, okay, would you want it to be slightly different, or would you want it to stay the same? If you want to stay the same, what are the arguments for that?
Yeah, I'm open to it changing, or staying the same. I think I see the argument on both sides. The same with you, Tajinder. I didn't think about what Lucy said when it comes to exams, but also I feel like there's something about that spring / summer, early summer term that feels quite different to winter anyway. Like the weather's better. We have like a bunch of bank holidays. Like it just feels like May half term never feels as bad as like October, for me anyway. So I'm open to it changing. I'm open to it staying the same. I feel like I don't have really strong opinions either way. I think Lucy's completely right that it's very obviously linked a lot to exams, and I didn't think of it in that way. But I do also think there's something to be said about how exhausting the first term often is, and how you spend so long trying to, you know, catch up when the spring term begins. And exactly like Lucy said, there's huge variation in that time of the year. Sometimes you have a really short January, Feb, you know, spring 1 half term. Sometimes you've got quite a long one, and it's really difficult. There's always loads of deadlines and loads of parents' evenings at that time of year. Yeah. And I just think that if the winter term, if the autumn term was easier to get through, or just maybe slightly different, then maybe the rest of the school year would flow a bit more easily. But I think for me, I'm willing to have a stronger opinion on it if there's a really good argument on either keeping it the same or changing it. But at present, I don't really mind.
I suppose part of the problem would be that like parents would argue they don't have like 6 weeks off.
Yeah,
they genuinely don't. Childcare is an issue, and it is genuinely like something that you have to consider. But then I suppose like that's something you've got to consider regardless of like when the half terms are. I think it's just a bit more manageable for some people to have their half terms in a slightly different way. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't, like you say, Lucy, that there's not really a real solution unless somebody actually turns up and says, this is what we exactly want to do, or like we put a timetable together. I think that'll have to be centrally like involved as well, because if we're going to stagger it, for example, then it will have to be a government that turns around and says, this is how we're staggering it, because you can't just go like local authority to local authority, like, what do you think, which is what happens at the moment. And it doesn't quite work out. So I know from my own family, like their half terms are always like slightly different weeks. My mum always thinks I'm going to come home a week earlier than I possibly can, because in Leicester they have their half terms a week early. But then other places have them like slightly later. And actually, we don't have a national picture. Like, I don't know how you feel, but I don't think we do.
No.
Yeah, I have a lot of family in Leicester. Sorry, this is so relevant. But I have a lot of family in Leicester, and yeah, they're always on different half terms, like almost always. I think there was once we had the same half term because they tend to come down to London or we go up to them. And yeah, we're just always running on different, like I almost feel like they're in school in another country because they also go back at the end of August. which for us is quite unusual. But
In Leicester?
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
think?
'cause they break up earlier and they start earlier as well.
Yeah, they broke
It's
up like
bizarre.
mid-July, and they came to London, and then my London cousins were complaining, saying they've still got school. And then I know about a month from now, it's going to be the opposite story. Like the ones in London are going to, you know, be like, well, we've still got a week off, and then they're going to be back in school.
Yeah, I mean, they even do it at Christmases because my son's girlfriend teaches in Manchester, and there were years where down here we were breaking up on something like the 15th of December because of the way it worked, but going back earlier in January, sort of the 3rd of January, but she was having to work till the 22nd of December, and it's exhausting. And that was one, you know, we had really late finishes some years, and that was always when my children were younger as well. And when you're trying to go Christmas shopping and trying to get everything sorted, oh God, it was so hard. It was just so hard because you literally had 3 days and then the weekends. And when you've got younger children as well, my whole weekend was taken up taking them to a football match or to a party, or do you get what I mean? So you never had all that time really to go and try and get everything organized as well. And it was maybe just before internet shopping became almost the predominant form of shopping as well. So that was really hard. I found it really difficult. Maybe it's different now, but then my colleagues would say, ones without children, no, I want to get hammered every day over Christmas, and then I want a week off to recuperate before I go back to school. So it's
I don't think it spends your holidays the way that you want to, and I do think it takes at least a week to really recuperate. So therefore, like having 2-week half terms, etc., are quite extensive, I think. However, like you say, Lucy, unless we've actually got proper means of sorting this out and like having somebody like do this centrally, which I don't always agree with doing things centrally, but I do think on this occasion we need somebody to go like, what are the current half terms? How can we like make it like mix and match or do whatever we have to do?
Yeah.
So there's always going to be overlap, and I don't think we can avoid that. I think if we genuinely want to like make things better, but I think the suggestion from Yasmin, which is like the blue light card, actually just give teachers like a discount like during those half terms. I genuinely think there's not like we should genuinely have that, because it's one of the hardest things that you do, like is that you're constantly paying over and above just because you're a teacher. And actually, why should you have to do that? Like, why should you have to pay more during the half terms and all the rest of it? And for about 3 years, I wasn't a teacher. I used to go off and like have holidays at other times of the year. And it's true, it does cost less. It just does.
Now, well, people get so jealous of the teacher holidays, from other professions, and really, the moan, and they've got however many weeks off in the year, and they still complain. But the rigidity of the teaching calendar, there is no option. You cannot have your boiler repaired until the half term if you're living alone, for example, because I had a colleague who had to freeze for several weeks running up to the February half term because she had to be there to let people in and out because of her dogs, and it was just and so it's so rigid. I mean, it's why I had to leave education, because I took on a different job that you can do alongside education. I'm a counsellor, but I couldn't get the flexibility to be able to do it to the fullest. And but it has to be. I mean, teaching has to be rigid, because you cannot be flexible with how you teach. You can't say to to parents, can you bring your kids in for a longer day next week? Or it just doesn't work. So we have to adapt to that. But you're absolutely right. It does penalise teachers in terms of holidays and going away.
It's always like, just off the back of that, Lucy, whenever I tell people I'm a teacher, and if they're not teachers, it's always the first thing that I hear, oh, you get amazing holidays. But I think exactly as you said, like, people don't understand the rigidity of that. Like, I, in my training year of teaching, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And even though I've been in like remission for years, I have like an MRI every 12 weeks. I'm meant to be on an immunosuppressant like multiple times a year. That's like administered via drip in hospital. I always have hospital appointments. And like it literally says on my NHS record to only book me for an MRI on a weekend, because I just avoid weekdays altogether, because I can't guarantee that it's going to be a holiday, or, you know, it's going to be late enough in the evening that I'm going to make it there, or I will just have to constantly check the calendar to make sure, even if it is, because there was one time I actually booked it for 6 p.m. thinking, yeah, you know, it's a random Monday, I can get there. But what I didn't account for when it was booked so far in advance was that it was actually parents' evening that day, but I just hadn't checked the calendar. So like I lose a lot of weekends and a lot of school holidays to hospital appointments, let alone every other bit of like admin that you need in your life anyway. And I think people don't understand that. Like, I know that it's not just medical conditions. There's loads of other responsibilities that, you know, teachers can have in their lives that are really important. There are people who are carers. There are people with their own children. You know, there's so many other things that really occupy the time of teachers. But exactly as you said, Lucy, if I've ever needed a repair, or I've just kind of needed something that I couldn't really have foreseen or accounted for in advance, you're just almost never gonna get it. You know, you can't just rely on the goodwill of your managers. At least in my case with a medical condition, I've often been at schools where HR and the head teacher are really supportive. If I've had sort of like emergency where, like, there's times where I have to have a lumbar puncture. I have to have a lumbar puncture once a year, which is like a needle in your spine. And they're never things that I can plan for in advance. And you know, I've had times where I've even tried to aim it for the school holidays because it's exam season and I teach like year 11s every day. But also, you know, having a medical condition, I have found that head teachers and HR teams can be really, really supportive of that and just, you know, give you the time off, and so you can just put yourself first. But it's really difficult. It's really, because then you just end up with more work to catch up on, more things to do, more cover work to set. So either way, like, you're still working really hard. It's almost easier to like not be ill as a teacher, not have a day off, you know?
Definitely.
We've just had like a message from like Paul Foss, who's like talking about that he needed 2 days off for in advance for family wedding. And let's face it, like, you know, families, you know, people get married when they want to. He was asked, he was able to do it, but it had to be unpaid. But he just felt like he felt something that was really unreasonable. And I think that's understandable, because actually, and I'm not saying that we should be able to take time off whenever we feel like it, but we never can. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, unless it has to be unpaid, therefore, you know, you do that. Whereas actually quite reasonably in like private sector work that I've done before, you could just go on, book those holidays. So you have few holidays, I accept that. But then having done both the private and the public sector, and particularly education, I don't think you need, I'm probably going to be quite controversial now, I don't think you need as many days off. Like, with due respect, I do think that teachers need that time off because they don't get anything like it. I think people think that you work from 8:45 to like 3:30 or 3:15, whatever it is, right? And I think that you work your hours and that's it, and then you go home. So you have this relatively short day. But what they don't seem to understand is that what you're doing all day, every day, is you're with the children. So therefore, no, you can't mark all the books. You can do some active like marking if you want. But let's face it, it's not going to be every single book you're marking. So you still got to check over it by the end of the day. You still got to replan lessons sometimes. You've got to redo resources. You've got to like think about what you're doing the next day in a way that other people don't have to necessarily do that. Do you see what I mean? Like, you know, like when you do other jobs, you can plan yourself in a slightly different way. And that doesn't mean that you never adapt, you don't do anything else. But you do have to do those things. And the consistency of you being there matters a heck of a lot. So actually, I can understand in some ways why you're not allowed to just go off and like go, I've got a family wedding, whatever. But at the same time, it's quite a reasonable thing to do in any other sector apart from ours.
Well, as long as you're not going to a wedding every month, you know, there's sort of a one-off, one occasion. And people need to remember as well that teachers aren't paid for 52 weeks of the year with 5 weeks holiday. They are paid for 43 weeks or something. So actually, most of the holiday is unpaid as well, and they don't recognise that.
Last year, sorry, another irrelevant story, but kind of relevant. last year, one of my cousins in Leicester was getting married in October last year. And because they're half term, so she called us all and she said, I've booked it for half term. And obviously all of us from London were like mortified because it was half term in the Midlands and not for us. Anyway, it was like a random Thursday, had to leave school at the end of the day, drive all the way up to Leicester, was there until like Somali weddings tend to be at night. So like I didn't miss the wedding, but I also didn't really think far ahead because, you know, I was there until about 2 a.m, then drove back to London. And then when I got back, it was about, you know, near enough to 5. And I just thought, is there any point in going to sleep? Like I've got school in the morning. So I didn't. And I went to school on no sleep. And I was just so like disorientated, but just trying to hide it. And then I had a formal observation period 1, like just an unannounced one with the head teacher, in fact. And I just remember like almost like freezing when she walked in. Like she was lovely and I got nice feedback, but it's just because, you know, when you haven't slept at all and you've had like a really busy day and it's the end of the school week, like the end of the school week is bad enough with normal sleep. I just remember thinking, yeah, I'm never doing this again. Next time I'll actually just ask for the day off, because it was a nightmare.
It's hard. It's like you do have these like formal things that you have to go sometimes and you have to deal with. Okay, right. I'm going to move on to the next story. Before I do that, let's talk again about our great advertisers who are John Catt Educational, publishers of like professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. If you want to level up your professional development today, visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles and use your code, which is JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Right, okay, so the next thing that we're looking at is the idea that we need more media literacy. So this was a story in TESS, and it came from somebody who said that we need to critically evaluate media as a key life skill, and it's saying that it's often relegated as a one-off lesson. So it's come from the House of Lords, by the way. And so what it's basically saying is that we should spend more time on social media because actually what we're doing at the moment isn't sufficient, and we should deliver lessons on media literacy and the ability to evaluate media critically and spot fake news, for example, and that we should have like, you know, this done by experts from subject associations, although I think it possibly is, well, this is my opinion, driven by those subject associations in the first place. And so basically it just wants us to do more, like in terms of like, you know, like IT education. So I'm not really sure what we're lacking at the moment. So my beef would be this. What is it precisely that we haven't done? So we can't prevent fake news. We can't prevent people from sometimes even learning it, like ourselves included, right? So what can we do? What can we do to make it better? But equally, what do we take out? Because what they're not talking about with this is what do we take out in order to put that in? Do you see what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah.
It's like just add it in. So where, like, you know, do we extend school hours so we can have more time on like so-called fake news? Like, I mean, it's been there for a long time. I'll start with you, Lucy. What do you think?
Well, I have 2 thoughts on this. The first one being that the article suggested that it could be done in English lessons. Now, if you think about it, this is down to your ability to think critically. And we are probably losing that ability in lots of ways anyway, so it's not a bad thing, because critical thinking is a skill, a life skill, and we know that we see lots of people, for example, we were talking earlier about, you know, seeing people saying things on Twitter that are completely ludicrous, that, you know, it just obviously aren't being thought about. You read something, you go, oh, that's the thing. So I don't think it's a bad thing, and they talked about fitting it into the English lessons, which is where critical thinking is developed, I think, in those lessons, when you're reading poetry or a play and you're thinking, what does it mean? And I can see how it could be fitted in, but I think it shouldn't be like social media. It should be the critical thinking, because that's the thing, and you can shoehorn that in. You can say, right, today, I remember a lesson I had when I was at school where we were having the lesson, and a teacher came in, and then he went out again after a couple of minutes, and then the teacher said, right, stop. Who can remember what Mr. So-and-so was wearing? What top did he have? What colour shoes? And it was a history lesson, and we then looked at things, imagery from the suffragette that threw herself under the horse and things like that. And that was trying to get us to think about what we saw and what we saw, how that, whether we noticed it, whether we were paying attention to things that were happening in our everyday lives. And so I get that from that perspective, but to make it a lesson, I remember covering an IT lesson once, and they had left me 3 videos, I think it was, and you had to watch the first bit of the video and then talk about it and then watch the next bit, and it was about a girl who was being maneuvered into a dangerous relationship. Why don't you send me a photo, that kind of thing. And when we stopped, and I went and said, right, guys, what have you got to say about this? Nobody said anything. And I went, come on, And then I thought, okay, well, I'll start on this. So I said, well, what I was seeing was blah, 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 nothing back. So I thought, okay, let's go to the next video. Same thing. And I went, my God, surely somebody here has something to say. And one kid went, we've seen it all before, miss. And I just thought that literally sums it up. They are bored of being lectured to. And so that's my thoughts on it.
Yes, sir.
That is so funny. I think what's happened to the screen?
No, I was thinking the same, yeah.
We are all here. I know. I mean, like, it was just all you, Lucy, for a bit.
I think that I just lost my train of thought. I was about to say something. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I don't want to put schools down. I think, like you said, Tajinder, schools already do such a great job. They're already, fitting so many things in. But I do as well often think about the fact that society and technology is evolving so quickly, and it's becoming more and more evident that we're going to have so many children who move into careers or just jobs or industries that don't really exist or aren't really understood at present.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to that, Jasmine, because when you say that things don't exist, fair enough, they don't, but they always evolve from what you already have. So I'm not talking about an impossible future.
I was literally just going to say that, but I was going to say that's always the case. It's always been the case that teachers and students will be in different generations. So I get that as well. I think a lot of the time what is ignored is it's not just children who benefit from this training and knowledge and understanding, but it's also teachers. Things like deep fakes and AI impacts everybody. I took these children on a school trip in December to Barclays, and we had some of their senior managers telling us that they've been attacked by, I don't know, people who do fraud, who basically made deep fakes of the senior managers within Barclays, which was then played to actual members of their team who can actually distinguish. So this is something that affects everybody, including adults. And I just think, for me, again, I don't know where the time would come from, but I certainly think if there are additional things that need to happen in schools, then it's something the government need to take seriously, rather than just kind of dump that on schools. And whether that's external, I don't know. So obviously I don't think that, you were asking earlier, Tajinder, I don't think the school day should be longer, and I get what you're saying, there isn't much time, but
but where from? What would you dump in order to teach this?
So it's not so much that I would dump anything. I don't, do you know what I mean? I'm a science teacher, and I know full well that we barely get through the curriculum every year. We just about managed to finish it. And I'm certainly not going to, put down any other subject. I can imagine it's the same absolutely everywhere in a school. It's just, for me, I think the only realistic places I could imagine is in, say, if in assembly times or in tutor messaging, if there were some sort of external visitors or external messaging from experts, then maybe that's the only kind of time I could imagine. But in terms of actual lessons, I just really don't know, because every teacher I know is, racing to the end and trying to finish their content and get children prepared for exams or whatever kind of assessments they have in their subject. So I don't know.
Can I just push back a little bit against you as well, Lucy? When you were saying that, like, English is a place where you do critical thinking. Well, critical thinking happens in all lessons, right?
Yeah.
If we're going to take away from actual knowledge, which can support you to distinguish between fake news and real news, right? So if you have a solid base of knowledge that you know is there, then actually you can at least start to have a base of something, right? And yes, even that knowledge which is disputed, you can start to know about it. So if we start taking away from that to teach this, then what do you do? And why English actually overall? Because English is like quite a broad subject where you've got both fiction and fact. And you're supposed to have that mixture of it. But mostly it will be fiction anyway. So maybe it's not the best place to actually teach it, because maybe there's a better place to teach it. But like there where, you know, you're talking about different plays, different stories, different whatever. And what fake news plays into is the idea of a story that you can believe in, which is just simply isn't true.
Yeah, I mean, my example that I gave from when I was at school with my teacher, who was Mr. K, if he's still around, he was amazing. But he, that was in a history lesson. So those kind of subjects, I mean, you're not going to fit it into maths necessary. I can't see how you can. I just felt that I could see more readily how you could adapt the English curriculum to fit it in is kind of where I'm coming from, rather than actually having it as a standalone lesson. You know, the kids then go, I know what's coming now. We're going to be lectured about not, you know, TikTok not giving us the best sources of news and all that kind of stuff. But it's this skill of critical thinking rather than the media stuff itself. Don't forget, we've got PSHE as well, and you know, there are some elements of it that are done in PSHE. That really needs a massive overhaul, by the way. That would be my comment on that. Massive overhaul on PSHE. But, you know, you could shore it up within the PSHE curriculum whilst teaching the skills needed to think about what you're seeing. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm responsible for whole school PSHE next year. It's one of my responsibilities. And and I've been thinking about adding a lot of stuff about, you know, technology and AI, and, you know, like I've been thinking, because I was told essentially to prepare the whole year's worth of content in advance, like kind of front load it. But I actually think it might be better to change it alongside a lot of, you know, current affairs, or as and when things come out over the course of the year, because then, you know, you can deliver things to children in a timely manner, and, you know, make sure that everything is relevant. I mean, everything at school always is relevant, but yeah, I've been thinking about what on earth I'm going to do.
I mean, the interesting thing was, did you see that video call in? I think it was like LBC or something like that. And maybe I've got like the actual radio station wrong. Basically, like this 10-year-old rang in just to say about how, and this is all to do with like, you know, media, but how her best friend has now got like an AI boyfriend. Yeah. And all she wants to do is go home to that AI boyfriend. Right? She just
it was LBC. Yeah.
It was LBC. Yeah, and it was really heartbreaking to listen to that, because, you know, like we all had like a best friend at, like, you know, when you were 10, like when 9, 10, whatever. Well, and if you didn't, well, fair enough, it was a very lonely situation. But I think, given that, like, I wasn't a particularly, like, I wouldn't have said I was the most popular person, like at primary school necessarily. Like, I had friends and like I knew people, but, you know, like I had a really good friend, and if she just abandoned me for an AI boyfriend, I think I would have been quite devastated at that point. So literally, it's just so heartbreaking. And so the idea is also this, like, how do we teach them that this is fake? Like, it's not a real thing. And it's really funny because I've been I think I probably did. I think I told you, Lucy. I don't think you know about it, Yasmin. Basically, I managed to break my toe, Yasmin, is what I managed to do. So I broke it, and I had to like had an enforced like situation where I just had to elevate it. Couldn't walk around much, couldn't do much. So I was going down this like sort of slightly Facebook like, you know, rabbit hole of like videos, and some of them were great and some of them weren't. But then all of a sudden, like the other day, like I came across like this real like weird video, and it was all about I could be your AI boyfriend, and I just like you. And then, and you know, like even as an adult, you're listening to this and going, "This sounds really nice," up to a point, and then you go, "No, this is just really weird. This is so fake." Like, actually, it gets to a point.
That's scary.
But if you're a child, it's not like that for you. Do you see what I mean? Like, as in,
Yeah.
like, it can start off with you as an adult who already has had like relationships, whatever, and knows people, and you kind of go, okay, it sounds a bit funny. Like, maybe it is interesting, but it's funny. But let's just stop it now, right? But a child would not stop that. And so when we're talking about lessons in this, I think one of the things like even I need to think about, because I'm on pushing back, going, well, we're going to have the time, we're going to have the time. But I worry about the lock-on reality that younger people have. Now that they have AI, now that they've got access to smartphones, now they've got all this, what is their lock-on reality that would make them go, actually, do you know what, this is a load of creepy nonsense, I'm just going to like scroll on through, right? Do you see what I mean? Like, do you see where I'm from, right? So, you know, I'm just like, whatever. So I've spent like, yeah, the last kind of like week basically in London, like meeting up with friends and stuff, like real life. But I don't think that they would have that lock on real life that they would want, as opposed to being locked into this unreality and what that does to them. So when we're saying like, do we need to give them media literacy? No, but I think we do need to say something about AI and like what it can do, because I think it's really worrying that they won't even have real life friendships at this point, because it's so easy to be amongst people who agree with everything that you say.
But the danger of that is just terrifying, where that relationship can lead. Will they take them into criminality? I mean, how do you know that that's, even if it's madness, how is it safe? It's frightening. I haven't heard it.
And Tarjinder, like, I think what particularly struck me about that story, I also saw the same LBC clip. It was the 10-year-old girl who called in basically saying, you know, my friend comes to school and basically says that we're not as good as her AI boyfriend. And, you know, the comparison there really struck me, because, you know, this is a child who can't really differentiate between, you know, the people and relationships, interpersonal relationships in real life and AI. And I think one thing that's also really concerning about AI is it's pretty much designed to just validate anything that you say. And so that can embolden people. That can embolden people with, you know, views that might be harmful to themselves or harmful to others. You know, if you're, I actually know people who use ChatGPT all the time to just kind of talk to it like a diary, you know, kind of vent about what they're frustrated by, or, you know, how they're feeling. And, you know, I've seen people doing it, and I've asked them, you know, to show me, and you know, it gives you a response that basically just validates anything that you say. And I actually saw a news article just last night about how now ChatGPT, anything you put in there can actually be used against somebody in a court of law. I saw an article, I'll send it to you guys after, but I literally saw an article from the CEO of ChatGPT. And you know what's weird? When I saw that, like, his picture almost looked like AI. So like part of me was thinking, is this actually real? Like I just wasn't sure. I've become really paranoid. But yeah, ChatGPT now, like things like abuse and things like that people write about on ChatGPT could actually be intercepted and used in a court of law.
So Tom has just said there's no danger with Tarjinder. You would have a friend who agreed with everything. Ha 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 is always, which is really amusing, because actually I have spent the last like couple of days with people that that I more agree with, less agree with, whatever, right? But actually we're still really good friends. Like, you know, it was lovely meeting them all, and I don't see how you would make those friendships with AI like involved. Like you say, like if you're genuinely so locked in that everything that you say has got to be validated, I just don't see how you do that. Do you see what I mean? Like even like if I'm honest, like over the last 4 days, even the person that I agree with the most, we still had disagreement over something, right? As in she still thought differently to me about something, right? And good, because how else do you understand different perspectives, different points of view, different ideas? Because ultimately we do come from different perspectives, because we've all had like different experiences, and that's fine. Like we have to bring it to each other somehow. But what AI is doing is basically saying, I can just tell you that you're wonderful all the time, you know, all the time. And actually, And more to the point, I can create this amazing, beautiful person who likes you and you will think is beautiful too. Do you see what I mean? Like that was the whole thing about like this image, like on Facebook. It's like this really beautiful, like looking man who's not real, but it was very much like, I'll be your friend, I'll do this, I'll listen to you. And it was like, you get so sucked in. If you're in a bad place, you get so sucked in. And
If it could put up a shelf, I might be interested. Put up a shelf, put petrol in my car, maybe I'm there.
But the point is not that. The point is like Yasmin was saying, is just to validate you endlessly all the time. And it's really, like I said, the problem isn't necessarily when you're stronger or when you've had more relationships. The problem is when you've had none. Like when you're a child, you've not really had proper relationships, or you've not been around. You're still developing those friendships in the first place. So how do you go from that? How do you even develop a friendship in the first place, right? And Jordan Peterson would always say that friendships are basically like the basis of like relationships, right? So part of the reason why like you have all these friendships is because eventually you're going to have a relationship one day with somebody, right? And maybe not everybody will, fair enough. But the point is, that it's almost like a predicator. Like you have your fights, whether it's with your siblings, whether it's with your friends, whatever. Like, you get these things, but you're not going to get through any issues. So what are you going to do at the end of it? What you're going to expect some perfect person just to walk up to you? It's almost like killing like adult relationships in these children, because they're going to expect something that simply can't happen.
But then the idea is that parents need to know that their child's doing that. Parents need to not give young children access to the tools that enable them to do that. At the end of the day, as difficult as it is, and I've had to take phones off all three of my children at some point or another, and good God, it was a miserable experience, but you do have to do it. It's not introducing it in the first place. At 10 years old, that's quite young to be accessing our AI without a parent saying, what are you doing? What are you looking at?
To such an extent that they think they're having a relationship with an AI boyfriend. Genuinely. Like, don't get me wrong, like, young children do sometimes, and it always amuses me when they do that in primary school. And they're like, we're going out. And you're just like, well, where are you going? What, to the playground where I send you in the first place, right? And they genuinely do think, I'm going to go out with this person. So you kind of like restrict it a little bit, but this is now unrestricted. Like, this is somebody thinking, and not even in a playful, like slightly silly way that they're having it. And by the way, like I remember being in one particular primary school, and there was a boy and a girl, and it was year 6. And she turned around to the boy and just went, I think we're married now. And that boy just kind of freaked out, because he was like, I don't think I can get married at this age. I don't think, do you know what I mean? Like, but that level of seriousness is actually quite disturbing to young children. It really is. And I think she meant it almost like as a joke, and she wasn't disturbed by it. But he really was. And like, we had to have like a teacher like really speak to him and go like, there's no way that she can just say that you're married when you're married. Like, this is not, it doesn't work like this, right? It's not that level of seriousness. But then I worry about an AI like bot or whatever, like turning around to like a young child and saying these things, like almost like going down that route. Because you can imagine it quite easily, can't you? Like, it'll just go down. So why does this child even think she's got a boyfriend for a start? And seriously, an AI boyfriend? And where are the restrictions on what is being said and who it's being said to and in what way? Because I don't think AI has got like that kind of mentality that it would ever think that it will just go down whatever route you want it to.
Yeah, it's just designed to do exactly as you say. That's exactly it. So it's really concerning, and it kind of begs the question: what are children putting into the AI machine to kind of get those kind of responses as well? But even what you were saying there, Tarjinder, I've taught children who watch a lot of TikToks about manifesting, and I don't know if you guys have heard of like manifesting culture. Yeah, which is it's basically when. So Lucy, it's almost as though, I'm not going to describe this particularly well, but it's almost as though it sounds like it'd be a good thing, but it's not. It's like you think about what you want, and then you basically believe that you've done what it kind of takes to get it. So like, say you've got a massive crush on somebody, it's quite unrealistic for you to ever get together. You basically say that you're going to manifest it. And sometimes I guess maybe it does work out. And so people say, I manifested this, you know, it's because of the way that I thought about it.
God.
I kind of like summoned some sort of like, I don't know, and I got what I wanted. And I've honestly taught kids. I've genuinely taught, and I mean like 10, 11 boys who will come to my room at break time, lunchtime and say, Miss, can I speak to you? You know, my girlfriend, I've been talking to this girl on Snapchat, or I've just got into a relationship with a girl and she's now turned around and told me that she manifested this, and now I'm really scared, you know. And I can't laugh. I just have to, you know, help them through it.
Good
but like,
grief.
it's really like, it's like a big thing on TikTok. It's like part of the brain rot on TikTok, you know. But it's, you know, people say that, and I guess there are some good times, like somebody maybe being a school kid wanting to attain a degree in the future, and then I guess when they graduate, you know, being able to say, I manifested this. I get the sentiment in that kind of example, but you know, to kind of force people into like friendship and relationships and then say you manifested this all along, like it sounds so calculated and scary for children.
But it would, even for as an adult, wouldn't it? Like if somebody turned around to you now and said, like, I manifested my way into like your
Yeah.
It would be like, it'd be like, okay, fine, I think we're going to have to stop this thing right now. like genuinely, like you can wish for things. I think what they're saying is that they're like, what they mean, I think, Lucy, is they wish for something, and that wish happens.
Yeah.
What you wish for happens, right? Like, you know, genuinely, you know, like. And again, like I'll just refer to last week, I really wish to have a couple of days off, like down in London, to meet people that I've not met in a long time. And guess what? They all happen to be there in one thing. I didn't manifest it. I just I hoped for it. And quite frankly, that hope kind of came true because people were just around, right? Because when I started asking people, they were like, well, we're off on holiday on this week, and this week in August. And I was like, do you know what? Just go down to London next week. You know, just do it, right? Because it sounds like everyone's off in August, and actually they've got this week where they may have like some flexibility. You might actually be able to see them, right? But that's not how people see it. If they're younger, they see it in a very different way because they think. Tom's
killing me.
Tom's just like provoking me at this point in time. We'll speak later, Tom, is what it comes down to. But the point is, you're not manifesting something. You can hope for things, and but do you see the difference between us explaining that even within ourselves and having examples of like where we may have hoped for things, those things came true? Like, you know, like you may have hoped for a degree, fair enough, you know, you did your best to we all did our best, like get those degrees, like, you know, we hoped for it at some point, like obviously we applied. But the difference between hoping for something and manifesting it is massive, because manifesting is like, I can make this happen regardless of all reality. And that reality aspect is what really worries me with like younger children, because I think they're not getting enough.
Yeah, I think normal aspects of life are now kind of being changed into something that they're not. I think it's totally normal as a human to make plans about your future, to be uncertain about how it's going to go, but, you know, to work towards it anyway. And sometimes you attain it or achieve it, and other times you don't. And, you know, you go back to the drawing board. But I think this whole, I don't know, there's something very self-centered now about the kind of messaging on social media. And, you know, people are being taught to give themselves more credit for things than, you know, or to kind of believe that they earned it or they deserved it, or it's there's a lot that I just think concerns me on social media that children consume every day.
I think there's a narcissism that comes from the social media world, and we can all be susceptible to that. I'll be honest, I think I've been susceptible to that before, where I'm like, I'm really important now, I've got so many followers, and do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, actually you're not that important. Like, it's not about you. But for a while you can get sucked in. But again, the difference is, have you had like enough reality beforehand to be able to not be sucked in? Do you mean, even if you got temporarily sucked in, can you get sucked out? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not dealing with it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I think the problem is that if you grow up in that world where that's all you have and you've not had anything else, as in you've not spent enough time with your siblings, you're not spent enough time with your friends in real life. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you genuinely haven't had enough reality, how do you then cope with this world, which is just going, it's all about you? Because like you know, that poor girl has got this AI boyfriend, but it's all about her, but we don't actually know what's being said to her.
Yeah,
Yeah, agree.
it's frightening.
And what rabbit holes do you go down as a result of that? Like that'd
Yeah.
be my worry. It's like if we're not paying enough attention, like if we're, you know, and there are controls that adults can put on these devices, but I think sometimes you've got this real weird mixture. Okay, so I think there is some element of neglect amongst some parents. But I also think there's an element of neglect even amongst some middle class parents, where
Yeah.
and where it comes from is more the fact they're time poor. Right. So they will just give their child that device because they want that child to have something. It's like, look, I gave you this something. It's about me. Like, you know, like I've given you this device. But they still don't put the controls in place. And that worries me because if we're having massive sections of society, not just a small number of people who are neglecting their children, but massive groups of people just doing it because they feel guilty, because they haven't got the time, because actually it's almost a replacement, and it shows your love for your child is like you giving them a device. Well, actually, this is really worrying then, because why would you control it?
You know, I grew up in a time where I had mobile phones in childhood, and I always kind of had things like the internet, but like my mom was, you know, single parent, like really poor. But I remember like she didn't want myself and my siblings to just kind of be exposed to that all the time. Like my mom always had boundaries in the sense that my mom has never, like, when I was a kid, she never asked to go through my phone. She never like policed my friendships. She always used to say, I will trust you to, you know, do the right thing and to tell me if there's any problem. But I was never like scared of her or hid things from her. But I remember every fortnight, my mum used to take us to the local library in our area. And like we each had library cards, my brother and my sister and I. And she would tell us, you know, get maybe 12 books for those 2 weeks. And I mean, my brother would never finish the books that he got, but I would often finish most of them. And like, I loved it. Like I learned so much from just going to the library, reading those books. It was so normal. Like we were moved onto a council estate when I was in year 6. And I remember there was a park right outside our window. And when we first moved there, it was one of the first things I said, oh my God, great, there's a park right outside. And my mum never, ever, ever took us to that park or let us go there. She always used to say, if you want to go to the park, just let me know, I'll drive. And she used to take us to, like, you know, the really leafy, nice part of Ealing. And I always just thought she was a bit weird. Like, I just used to think, like, why all this extra hassle? But it was only when I got older that I realized it was just kind of a subtle way of trying to help us, you know, stay out of trouble or just kind of avoid anyone that might be dangerous, and to just kind of sustain the friendships that we had from living in other places in the borough, and kind of give us that continuity. Like I didn't know most of my neighbors when I lived on the council estate, which is really unusual, but like it was something that my mum kind of set up in that way because she just felt like it was safer if a lot of our interests and friendships and all of those things were kind of off the estate. She didn't want it to become our identity. And, you know, I think as well, a lot of these, like when I often think of the children today, I think that I really benefited from a lot of services that don't really exist today. You know, I used to go to swimming for free. I used to go to the library. There was a lot of stuff that really helped me to get the education that I have and be the kind of person that I grew up to be. And I do often feel really sorry for children that if they're not at school, their parents often don't know where else to take them, or there aren't letters coming through their post about free services like libraries and swimming and sports and activities. And so a lot of the time they just kind of end up dumped with these devices because their parents think, you know, that that's what you're supposed to do, or that's how you keep them busy.
Yeah.
Completely agree, Yasmin. I genuinely think that there's a really valid point there. I don't know if either of you have heard Jonathan Haidt, and I do agree that like maybe there's criticisms to be had with him as well. But he wrote The Anxious Generation, and where he was basically talking about where social media is really having an impact. And so even my instinct initially would have been like, okay, we've got more anxiety. Like, you know, is that really genuine? Whereas he's saying actually it is, and it's being caused by social media. It's being caused by these devices. Like we don't actually know the impact that it's having on their brains. And so far as we do have research, it shows that actually like having certain social media apps like Instagram is like basically toxic for teenage girls. Like it really just drives them into a hole. Or like TikTok just like drains the attention away. Like actually is having a certain impact on these children that we wouldn't have had ourselves. Like you say, Yasmin, like myself, like even as a child, I would have been, my dad would have taken me to the library, every week, every 2 weeks, had loads of books, used to go out, used to get crazy about Wimbledon every year. We had these tennis rackets which you only use 3 weeks during the year, which is like just after Wimbledon. It was hilarious. And then every 4 years, there was the Olympics, so we used to make medals out of tissue boxes and stuff. So we used to basically get rid of all the tissues from the tissue boxes, which drove my mum crazy. And then we used to make medals from them. It's what else are you meant to make medals out of? But these experiences that you have that are real and that are funny and that are just genuinely together with other people, whether it's your siblings, whether it's your neighbours, whether it's other children, are not happening the same way. And what he's trying to drive towards, what Haight is trying to drive towards, let's go back, just taking them to a playground and have done with. And we are going to have to stop this thing. But essentially, I'll leave you on an anecdote. So my niece, because my sister-in-law is lovely with her, she takes her out all the time. Basically, they live in a village in North Leicestershire. And when she was about a year old, we were just taking her out for a stroll, and so had the pram there. And me and my sister-in-law were just chatting away. Hey, the next thing you know, we're almost about to go past the playground. And she just piped up. She was happy enough, just, looking at everything or the rest of it, listening around. Also, it was what are you doing? Not taking me, the playground, it was almost like the playground's there. So she really did make a big fuss. And I just thought, Joe, what I want that from you. I want you to actually make a fuss over the fact that we're going past the playground. And you should know that playground so well that actually it bothers you that we're going past it and we're not just there, whereas I worry that there are so many children now who wouldn't even know their local playground. They wouldn't be able to recognize it at the same age, and that's sad. There's something sad about these things, that you wouldn't recognize a library, you wouldn't recognize outside, you wouldn't recognize your neighbors because you're spending so much time locked in these devices. So while I agree, going back to the story, while I agree that we do need more literacy around AI and all the rest of it, I do think that it's got to be a joint effort between parents and teachers. It can't just be let's let it all go to pot and then we'll teach you something and then hope for the best. Do you know what I mean? That you can't rely on us to do this. It's got to come from the start, because it's coming from the start now anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the discussion, and it's been lovely. Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you, Lucy. And I will see you again. Well, see you whoever we can see next week. And yes, thank you for this particular week's points of view.
Thank you.
Bye.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.